I think the biggest thing I tell when new investors, because we get calls from different clients, and I train a lot of newer agents too that want to be investors. I just tell them patience is really the key. Real estate is a marathon. It's not. I've never been. I did fix and flip and that type of stuff, and that's a hard business to really be consistent and stay at it and make money.
Welcome to the No Excuse Pro podcast, your weekly dose of motivation and actionable advice. If you're a realtor, financial planner, business owner, or anyone who's tired of making excuses and ready to take your success to the next level, you've come to the right place. Join your host, Kevin Brierton, each week as he chats with industry leaders who are going beyond the excuses to achieve their goals. So no excuses accepted. Let's get started.
Hey, Michael. Hey, thanks so much for joining me on the No Excuse Pro podcast, where I'm interviewing professionals like yourself in real estate, lending, and financial advising, CPAs. And I want to learn more about what you've done over your career to really have no excuses in what you're doing. But first, before we kind of jump into that, tell us a little bit about what you do and what profession are you in?
Yeah, so my name is Mike Crawford. I'm a designated broker at Peak Investment Properties. We're a property management company. We manage about 1,000 units total, a couple hundred single family homes, and the rest are multi-unit apartment complexes from 3 units to about 60 units is the largest one we have now. And we're full service. We do everything from collect rents to evictions to some CPA type work. So yeah, we're kind of full service. We can do pretty much everything as far as property management and run a building.
Well, so what made you get into property management? Tell me a little bit about your journey.
Well, it didn't seek out property management. It kind of found me. So when I was 19 years old, right out of high school, I went to Glendale Community College, and real estate kept popping up. I did a bunch of different personality tests, and real estate kept coming up. So I went to real estate school and just kind of hit the ground running. Started out as a residential agent back in the days when there was no do not call list. So me and a friend used to call 400 and 500 people every day and get listings. And so started out that way. And then I met my future wife, Sandra. Her mom had this company. She started it in 1999. So I did residential real estate for a couple of years, and then, sales is up and down. And I saw the benefit of property management where it's a consistent type salary. So they kind of recruited me over, and I did that, just leasing. And then I did sales on the side. Did that for a few years, and it went really good. We grew the company quite a bit. And then 2005 came up and started buying and flipping houses just like everybody was. And that was going really well. So kind of took a break from property management for a bit. I bought another distribution business, and while the flipping business was going really well, and came back 2014 full time. And then my wife and I officially purchased the company from my mother-in-law and have been kind of revamping and fine tuning and ever since then.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you've been successful in real estate through that low period, obviously in 2007, 8, made it through, and now, continue to thrive. What's made a difference in your success over the years? What's the one thing that's made the difference?
I think just sticking with it. I think with property management and all real estate, telling the truth to your owners, whether it's good or bad or really what the market is, because people are watching the news and they're kind of seeing what the macro environment is. And I think just being honest and straight up with the owners is probably the biggest key, and to care as much for their property as, I tell all my employees, we treat every single dollar that we spend or earn as if it were ours. And I think that's made a big difference. And that's just our philosophy on how we were able to just grow organically. And
so you kind of look at every dollar you're spending as it is your property, not necessarily your investors. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, okay. I think that makes a big part of it. Because we don't have in-house maintenance, so we're a little bit different. So we sub everything out to different contractors. So when we get estimates from those guys, our construction team, that's kind of the first thought is when you look at an estimate, it says, if this was your property, is this a fair price? Would you pay this amount to get it done for your own house?
Mhm.
And I think it kind of changes the whole perspective of, we're not just trying to get stuff done and get it done and get it off the desk. We're actively, considering the thought, how long is the hold period for this owner? If they're going to hold it for 10, 12 years, it kind of dictates how we're going to make decisions on those properties as well. So caring, I think, is the biggest.
That's fascinating. So something that, some of our listeners, and I know a lot of my clients have brought up is like, hey, I bought my first property. I would like to, and I actually just had a conversation with somebody that's a firefighter that realized he's a veteran also, and realized like, man, I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. Like this is a tough career, and I got to have some other option, right? And I'll have meetings and conversations and strategy sessions, but then we kind of run in. I find what happens is we run into a roadblock of, okay, now what, right? Like, what would be a few things that you'd recommend for new investors to kind of start the process of, all right, I want to invest. I know I have a big enough why. I'm excited. I've read some books. Now what?
I think the biggest thing I tell when new investors, because we get calls from different clients, and I train a lot of newer agents too that want to be investors. I just tell them patience is really the key. Real estate is a marathon. It's not. I've never been. I did fix and flip and that type of stuff, and that's a hard business to really be consistent and stay at it and make money. It's a marathon. You win when you buy the property correctly. That's where you're going to make the money. It's not necessarily when you sell it or how you do it and the rent you charge. It's how you buy the property. So take your time and buy the right property in the area that you like, and don't overexpend and don't over leverage as far as with debt and stuff like that. So that's kind of what I push is, don't believe everything you see on DIY Network. It doesn't just happen in a week. Whatever you think the budget is, probably almost double what you think the budget is, because there's always those things that are going to come up that are just a learning lesson for the next one.
Yeah, it seems like for fix and flip, a lot of times it's people, you end up just getting another job. You're investing, but once that kind of job's over, you got to go get another job. And so property management, owning your own properties and managing it or having somebody else manage it is more of a long-term play. Can it seems like that's something that, kind of I had a takeaway from what you're talking about. What's a hurdle for some investors that may be doing a bunch of fix and flips? What's a hurdle that you've helped them overcome and maybe switching over from the fix and flip model where they get a bunch of money coming in and they got to go do the next project? And then how do they get over like the concern of like, well, I'm only going to make, $2,000 a month but I want to get $200,000. And how do you help them get over that hurdle?
I think we just kind of pencil it out and see. I mean, there's been a lot over the last few years, there's been a lot of fix and flip guys that have done that. And as that market kind of dries up, they either get stuck with a couple properties that they intended on selling that they can't get the numbers. And we just kind of show them how to, depreciate the property over time. And then you can still, put money into the property and get those expenses and those tax advantages right away. It's just an economics conversation as far as plan to hold it 5 to 7 years or 10 years, whichever it is. And this is how it's going to pencil out. This is the rent. This is what your cash flow is going to be. It's just those conversations, I think. But majority of the fix and flippers that I've seen over the last 15, 20 years, the ones that are killing it now are the ones that held a bunch of them and decided then, hey, I'm going to flip a couple and then I'm going to keep a couple. And almost every one of those investors are like, man, I wish I held every single one of them, especially now with depreciation. Now they're worth, 20x of what they paid.
Yeah.
And I think as that gets more contagious and the values are where we're at now, I think people are kind of more open to that. So it's an easier conversation to get people to want to hold them.
Yeah, it's fascinating. What's your biggest challenge your customers are facing right now, and how are you specifically helping them solve it?
So our clients, the biggest challenge right now is kind of vacancy. I mean, overall, out of the 1,000 units we manage, we're at 95, I think 0.2% occupancy, which is pretty solid. I mean, 100 is our goal right across the whole portfolio. But, we get down to 96% and I'm like, okay, we got to push hard and get going. So I think the biggest thing right now is there's a lot of inventory in Phoenix. So it feels like we're overbuilt right now. It kind of feels like 2008 where everybody's on crunch mode. It was everybody's kind of waiting for the election. Now that kind of happened. Didn't really make any waves as far as an influx of calls. The phone isn't ringing as much as on the leasing end. And we're in the holiday season. The November and December, once Thanksgiving hits, this is kind of the slowest time of the year for rentals, right? School's in session. There's not much going on. And there's a lot of properties that have come on board, these infill type properties, 10 units, 15 units, kind of a class A type product. There's a lot of that they're offering 3 months rent and stuff like that. So a lot of the B and C type tenants are upgrading into those better quality units and still paying almost the same as what they were. So I think that's the challenge right now, is to be creative, keep the operations tight, and keep the occupancy up. And to answer the second part is the things that we're doing right now are just getting creative to attract those potential tenants. We're doing no application fees on certain properties, moving specials, whether it's 3 months rent or $1,000 off rent. And then, they still have to be kind of qualified, and meet the criteria to get approved, but just being creative with that.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. So 90+% in, occupancy. What's the typical occupancy rate? I mean, I know in general from what I've read and what I see with my rentals, but what's the general? Is it 75? Is it 80? I mean, what has been historically over the last, say, 20 years?
Well, majority, usually it's 90%. That's the short answer. Usually when you're looking at purchasing a property and you're going to underwrite it yourself as an investor or a lender, they're going to factor 10% vacancy over the asset. So usually it's 90%. We like to be, 96 and above is kind of our target. 100 is perfect. But, when everything is occupied, the owners are happy, they're making more money. We're a percentage-based firm. So the more occupancy there is, the more we make and the more they make, and we're very transparent about that as well.
Lending will be at 75 when we're doing calculations on income.
Right.
We're going to use that income. So that's pretty conservative here, in that you're saying 90 to underwrite it to 90. So if you're an investor, you're thinking, okay, how much can I get? One of the moving pieces, though, is figuring out that rent, right? So I have I actually have a client right now where they're like, I want to rent a property out. And they're just guessing, hey, I'm going to rent it out for around $2,000 a month. Okay, well, how do you know that, right? Because your 90% could be a problem if your 90% is off and that initial number is off by 20%, right?
That's
so,
right. Yeah.
Do you guys do rental analysis then? And is that something that you kind of build out for them, and then that's what you're running off, and you're not just guessing, correct?
Exactly. So we're looking at multiple sources. I mean, MLS is a decent source. The local MLS, it's okay. There's not a lot of rentals that get ran through MLS for apartment side of it. So honestly, the best way to check is we check Zillow, Trulia, just local markets. We have our on-site managers check those local prices and see what it is. So more of the active type prices in the area is what's going to dictate the actuals for what the apartments are going to go for. So, and a good strategy is if the one down the street is comparable to your property and they're asking $1,295, then we can go $1,275 and just try to undercut that a little bit to get that occupancy. You never want to be above market or close to market. It's always good to be just a little bit below it. That way your occupancy is solid. And then, because that's what kills the multi-unit or any rental for that matter is turnover and, maintenance cost. Those are the two variables that we can do be efficient with.
Yeah. Overpricing is it could be such a disaster. When you're selling a property and also renting. We have a couple rentals and we've always found being slightly below, and then keep them we sign it, a lot of times we'll sign a 2-year lease, and then, they're super happy. They take care of the place. Like, we're not on a low end rental, but it's mid rental, I guess, price range, I guess.
Right.
but also lower right below the market. So I think that's a great takeaway. So thank you for sharing that.
Mhm.
What are two resources that you think like, man, if it weren't for these resources, I wouldn't be here today? It could be anything, two resources.
I think the top resource that we utilize now is our software. We use Appfolio, which is a online based software. We used to be on Yardi. Yardi's it's been around for a long, long time. Either platform is good. Yardi has its advantages. It's probably better in the CPA kind of world and more of the accounting side. Appfolio's come a long way. It's online based. We can do a ton of things online. We can e-sign stuff. We can mass text an entire property within a couple seconds. People can pay online, do applications online. So it's very digital. So we've been saying we're going to go paperless for the last, 8 years. I think it's less paper, not paperless is really where we're at. And I think that's where kind of everybody is. But so the number one is probably the software that we chose to switch to in 2014. I think that was a huge game changer. There's a lot of management companies that are using Appfolio, so it's getting, popular, and they add integrations constantly on there, so it's getting better and better. And so that's number one. As far as another resource, um, I think I don't know if it's a resource, but probably just the history. I'm a native in Phoenix, so I know a lot of the areas and the streets, and I've kind of memorized that over the years because we manage so many properties. And I think that's, a good resource for just knowing the area, and constantly doing rent surveys and seeing what's going on and seeing what properties are trading. So probably LoopNet, just some of the online platforms as far as to do your research and understand what's going on in the market.
Okay. That's really helpful. I think that, you know, having the software to back it up and make it efficient for you,
Yeah.
right? Because I mean, there's all these different problems we're trying to solve, and being efficient to help clients, I think is extremely important, because if you can help, a few clients really well, but then you're not helping the other clients well because it takes you so much time to do certain things. It's really important to utilize technology when we can go down rabbit holes there with AI and all this other crazy stuff going on.
Yeah.
But what's the one thing that frustrates you on a day-to-day basis in your profession, and what are you doing to fix it or overcome it?
I think I don't get frustrated very easily because I've been in this business a long time. So I've learned to kind of adapt. There's not a lot of problems, but there's a lot of situations in property management. I think the main focus is we're trying to be more efficient every single day. With our time, with our output, with our communications. That's been the main focus for the past probably 4 or 5 years. Oh, I mean, since I took over for sure, but definitely heavy. Defending your time and defending your calendar. I think that's a big thing. Um, Probably the most frustrating part of the industry is there's so many moving parts to property management. As a leader of a company with almost a dozen employees, there's constant interruptions. I think that's probably frustrating for me. So that's what I really worked hard to defend my calendar, close my office door, and say, this is my focus time. Like, I have to get these projects sorted out. So that's probably the most frustrating. And then it's the most exciting once you get things dialed in and it's efficient. And then, middle of the month for us is a little bit slower. Like this week, that's why I try to do all my meetings in the middle of the month, because the beginning is rents and the end of the month is all of our reconciliation to all the owners. They get all their income. So this is kind of a catch up and a production type, week and a half. So I really block out these week and a half to, move the business forward, figure out what's working and what's not working, getting feedback, and just trying to get better every single day and then every single month.
Yeah, no, I think that's awesome. I have fought different, once to, let me clear my email box and random times. And it's just, what I use, there's a tool that I use called Boomerang, and Boomerang is an email platform, but it allows you to pause your inbox. So it's kind of fascinating because you can actually pause the inbox, but still send emails. A lot of times if you go like work offline on your Outlook, well, then you can't send emails. Like sometimes you need to send an email while you're doing your focused work, but
Right.
you don't want to see all the other new emails coming in, so you can actually get through a few of it. Now, the reality is, should we use our email as an inbox or as a task list? That's debatable, but
Right.
if you move it to another task list and all you're doing is moving one thing in your inbox to another thing, and it's like then you're just adding a step. So I've found that the boomerang email system is really, really helpful. I learned that off of a Tim Ferriss podcast, and I've been playing around with it this year, and I really think it's very valuable during those focused times. So I'm the type of person, if I see it, I want to get it done and help the client out or help the partner out, whatever, and move it
Yeah.
along. If I don't see it, I'm a little bit better. But once I see it, I'm like, I got to take care of this. Maybe that's one of my no excuse mentalities is like, I can't let something go too long and not be handled, and it's probably a good thing overall. But what happens is when you probably could speak to this, that if there's three things that are urgent, well, you have to prioritize and execute at some level, right?
Right.
So that's where not everything can be urgent, and you have to figure out how to handle it. So I think the best thing about it is you're recognizing it, right? So you mentioned about like protecting your calendar or protecting your time. Is there anything else that you do that's unique or that you like to share that would be helpful?
Well, going back to what you said, I'm hooked to the email too, and I also listen to Tim Ferriss, and I've read pretty much all his books, so I'm a huge Tim Ferriss fan. He's got some fantastic insights on what he does to be productive. So I've learned a lot of stuff from him, and I know he talked about only checking your email twice a day, like 10 a.m. and 4 p.m., and then get it down to 1 hour or one time a day. So I tried that, and I've been in the habit to, in this business, there's so many things coming at you at once. And that's what I've been doing for so long, that if something comes in, I want to answer it right away to get it to move on and get the other project going. So I found myself the best thing I've done for the email is not open my email. It's on my phone, and it's hard not to just click the button and see what's going on. Even at 7 or 8 or 9 o'clock at night, when you're at home, it's like, oh, let's see if he answered me or whatever. And I've really tried to not do that, and it's tougher than I thought it would be. And I'm sure other people are like that too, that have a bunch going on.
Yeah. Yeah. There was about a year and a half period of time where I took it off my phone completely.
Yeah.
Challenge with that is that it actually gives you a little less freedom because it ties you to your computer or ties you to the office. So
Yes.
it's like I pick and choose my battles of like, I don't have my notifications on, but it's important to understand, like, if you take it off your phone, that means if you are away, but you really need to do something, now you got to bring your computer, and it becomes a little bit harder. That's what I found. I did
Right.
do the email checking a few times a day. I get a little bit more busy in the morning, so I'll kind of clear it at different times. But I think that's fascinating. I think everybody has to figure out what works for them,
Yeah.
and it's really a unique way to manage tasks. But I think for everybody listening, I think it's key to actually have some sort of process, whatever it ends up being. You got to
Right.
protect your time. Don't just be a slave to every single email that comes in, because you're working on their time, not your time. You are really a slave to what everybody else wants, not what your plan was. I think
Right.
that's extremely important. Where do you see the vision of your industry right now? What do you see the next couple years? What do you think the rental business, the servicing investors? What do you think the vision of your future in your industry is?
I think our industry is in a pretty unique spot. I mean, I read so many articles almost daily as far as predictions of what's going to happen. And kind of what I see right now is, and that's what I've sent out to my owner communications is, even last year, this year is all about this year, next year is all about operations and keeping buildings full, keeping the maintenance down, and just kind of fine tuning that and just kind of riding the storm out. Rents shot way up after COVID. Products that were $1,600-$1,700 a month are now probably renting at $1,400 to $1,500. So they've come down that much, probably 10-15%, some of them more. So as lease renewals come up, we're lowering rents if we have to keep those people in there. That's a harder conversation with some owners that, hey, you were getting $1,700, but we're either going to have a vacancy plus turnover cost, or we lower it to 1450. We sign another year or 18-month lease, and then we should be good, for the long term. So that's kind of what we're focusing on right now, is just operations, occupancy, and keeping it running as efficient as possible. Our collections are really solid. Finding resources if people do fall behind on rent. There's churches and all kinds of organizations that still have a bit of money here in Arizona. And we're giving those resources out to tenants that fall behind so they can get the money and pay rent and continue on. So I think that's kind of the short answer, is just keeping it as tight as possible as far as efficiency and keeping the occupancy up, especially over the next couple of years.
Those are tough decisions. I mean, any business owner needs to come to the realization they got to be profitable. We've seen the mortgage industry where banks have shut down, branches have shut down, companies have let whole divisions go if they're not profitable, and they got to be profitable. And letting people go is not easy. Like, I've had to let more people go over the last couple of years, built up the team, and then I make tough decisions. And the reality is, if you don't make those tough decisions now, you're gonna have a bigger problem down the road. And I think that's the key with if you don't lower rents, let's say as a rental, now you have a vacancy and that thing sits for 2 months, and would have been better to take a little bit less and have somebody in there for 2 years and sign a 2-year lease, or have a vacancy for 2 or 3 months. That could really become a problem. So I think that's those are tough conversations that you got to have. And I think that's what a No Excuse Pro is, because you're having the conversations that you might not want to have, and you're coming at it, I'm assuming, maybe you could talk about this. Do you come at it with data and showing, hey, here's why we're going to have to move the numbers down. Here's the rent sheet. Here's what's going on in the market. Here's what we recommend. I'm assuming you're coming at it with data. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're saying, hey, and we can email them different addresses and say, hey, look at Zillow, or look at here, see these prices. This is the same unit. This is what they're getting. You can see the days on the market, because we have counters on every one of our vacants. So we know exactly how long. As soon as it's vacant, the meter's running. So we know exactly how long it's vacant. So, and we just talk to them and say, we can hold out for $1,600 a month for another month or two, or we can lower it to $1,400 and get it rented, in the next couple of weeks. Because the fact is, it's all economics. I mean, we can hold out for 2 or 3 months for an extra $200, but the amount we can't make up for lost rents. I mean, if it's vacant for 3 months and we lose $5,000 in rent, we might as well just lower the rent $600 a month and got it rented, and had it pencils out the same way at the end of the year. So I think once you explain that to them, it's like, well, we can lower it 200 or we can keep it vacant. At the end of the year, it's going to be a lot smarter financially to just lower it $100 or $150 and get a good person in there and get the cash flow coming in, versus holding out for a little bit more. That's not going to move. It's not going to change their life at all anyway.
No, I think that's great. I mean, I think the key is having those tough conversations when you need to have them and not waiting too long is extremely important. That goes for family, with your kids, business. I think that's an extremely important thing to recognize. And sometimes in my life, I've realized that I'll push that off a little too long, just not want to be confrontational. And it's like, no, it's better to, really come at it with, hey, here's the challenge I'm having, and here's what we need to, how we're going to fix it, or here's some ideas. So, Michael, we're coming up on drive time right now. I want to keep this within drive time, and I really appreciate you coming on. Like, you've already had a big impact on, your business as a whole, in the direction you've helped you're helping 1,000 doors right now. I mean, that's a lot of people you're helping with, property management and investing. What kind of impact do you want to, leave in your industry? What's your driving factor there? And what type of impact do you want to leave?
I think the legacy, or what we want to do, is we want to be known as, one of the most honest property managers out there, one of the most efficient. I think that's what we strive for. That's what we talked about earlier. That's what we strive for every day. We want to grow, but we want to grow at a point to where it's sustainable and not just take on 500 or 1,000 doors at a time and then have a bunch of things fall through the crack. We we've done that, 15, 20 years ago where we took on huge portfolios, and it's really difficult, especially for us who want to be super efficient and we pride ourselves on being, that we care more than anybody else. So we're not going to do that. That's why the last few years we've kind of grown organically, and just slowly. Because I think everything in the real estate industry is a marathon, whether you're a property manager or a real estate agent or even in the lending business or an investor. I mean, this is a long game. So, and I think that's, and it shows with how productive we are and the clients that we have. But yeah, that's what we want to be known for is one of the most honest and efficient companies. And, and you get, because the more people we help, the more money we're going to make and the more they're going to refer to us. And, and that feels good when we get, as you get referrals from other people. And
I think it's great, Michael, because you're really like you're the real estate manager, right? Because you're managing their wealth through real estate. Where I'm a liability manager, I'm managing wealth through, lending and how do we come up with lending solutions. Right. And just like a financial advisor is managing their wealth that's in the stock market or, bonds and other that, right? So there's really three different pillars of wealth. That's the real estate, the actual assets like stocks, bonds, 401ks, and there's also the liability side and leverage side of it. So I think it's important to understand that you have a huge impact in helping people. I know that you've brought on a couple interns and you just have really helped their lives and change, and you're bringing them up in an industry. And it's exciting to hear that you got in the business when you're 19, and I know you're bringing other people in when they're in college, and that's a big impact. I mean, you're training in the right way. And I really appreciate you jumping on and just having that piece about you. You have a really good demeanor about you where it's like, hey, you know what? And you said this earlier on, like, there's so much stuff that can happen, whether any business you're in. And it's just like, how do we stay calm in the eye of the storm? And how do we slow down and just, piece it? I'll leave you with this. One thing I learned coming out and getting into the business world was I always referenced it like golf. So golf, you can have a really good swing or a good hit and you get all excited, and then you can have a really bad hit the next time. So on the excited ones, you can't get too happy. On the bad ones, you can't get too sad. You got to just play in this kind of zone of like, I'm good. I'll hit some good ones. I'll hit some bad ones. And I'm just going to keep moving along, and it's all good. And I'm going to enjoy the day. I think that's a lot like our business, right? Our business is, we can't get too excited on the stuff that's, oh, this is really amazing. I'm, have ego come out, like I'm the best in the world. And I'm, and then all of a sudden you have some blind spots and you crash and burn on the next month or two because you forgot to go back and maybe tell that landlord that they needed to lower the rents because you're like, hey, you know what? Here's the tough conversation I need to have. Maybe that's the harder thing to do, like having a bad shot in golf. And just kind of just playing your game, right? And so I realized that years ago. I was literally on the golf course getting all upset, early 20s, and I was like, what am I doing? And then it clicked. I'm like, this is just like business, And so I've always tried to have that mentality, just plug away, do my thing, do a good job. So I want to share that with you because I just feel like you have a great sense about you. And I think that's something that's important with the no excuse mentality. I built this podcast because over the years I've found traits in people, and I've kind of designated as no excuse because I think that is an excuse if you let your emotions get the best of you. And that can't happen. I feel like that can really be detrimental to people's wealth, people's investments, the longevity of your family's business. I mean, now you're taking that legacy on, and because you've become who you are, now you can take this over, which is amazing. And I'm sure your family is extremely happy with what you're doing. And I come from a family has a small business, and my dad's owned a small business for almost 50 years, and that's going to probably legacy will change over to my brother's hands at some point. And so we're kind of going through some of that in our family too. So it's exciting. And I think you're doing an awesome job, Michael.
Thank you. Yeah. And to kind of double down on what you just said, anybody out there listening that wants to get in property management, it's you definitely have to keep your emotions in check as far as the ups and down cycle, right? Because in a multi-unit space, the loans are only 5 to 7, maybe 10 years long. So usually once you get a property on, say if it's a new owner and they're gonna get the property, their loan is only gonna last for 5 years. They either have to sell it or refinance it. So usually they're going to sell it because if you're a good property manager, you're going to get it running really efficient. You're going to make them good money. It's going to show really good returns and it's going to be a lot more valuable. So then they're going to sell the property. So we're constantly trading properties because we'll get a property running really good and we got it running like a top. We're making good money. They're making good money. And then all of a sudden we get an email. Oh, by the way, we're going to sell it. It's like, oh man. So hopefully they'll buy a bigger property, right? And they'll have you manage it. That's usually the case, but sometimes they're going to retire or move on. So it's pretty unique business where there's other property managers in Phoenix. There's a ton of them, but we're usually trading properties back and forth because when our clients 5, 7 years, they have to sell the property and that buyer has a relationship with another property manager. So we're just handing the property off to them. And the same cycle goes around 2 or 3 years, something happens to where they sell it and then my guy buys it. So it's
that's the longevity. You got to be around to see that come around, right? Like
Yeah.
I've done, mortgage plans where somebody doesn't buy a house for a year or two sometimes, and then you're like, well, sign another lease or sign a 2-year lease. And they're like, okay, I'm ready, Kevin. I did what you told me. I did the plan. And the hard part about it is when you're young and you're into the business a couple of years, you don't see that return on investment. You might do the right thing. You might have the right plan. You might be maybe the guy that's taking care of the client the right way. Maybe you didn't close that deal right then, but you actually gave the best advice, right?
Yeah.
And then if you stay in the business long enough, I was told by a mentor in our business, 10 years, like stay in the business 10 years. Just put your head down, work hard, learn. 10 years, you'll be fine, And that gives you enough at bats, enough to learn, number one, enough to have these people come back around that you talked to a year ago, enough to have those, maybe those commercial loan adjustable rates or balloon, they have to sell it or refinance it. Now that person's going to sell and then buy and they tell their friend. And so the longevity is extremely important.
Yeah, that's what we tell our youngsters. I've got, Marcus, he's 20 and he's got his license and he's a go-getter. But in everyday conversation this is a marathon. Like you're going to talk to 20 leads this month. You might not hear from them for 2 years. And all of a sudden, but if you tell them the truth and you're honest with every single person you talk to, I showed him the other day, we took on a property. I said, look, when I talked to him, because I'd made notes when I originally talked and emailed and gave him everything. It was 3 years ago. I said, he saved that email that I sent him 3 years ago because I told him the truth. I said, when you're ready, give me a call, like no pressure, whatever. So I think they're kind of getting that, some of these new agents, but I get it. I was 19 and 20 in this business, and hungry and wanted to make $1 million. But I'm like, man, I made $6,000 my first year. It takes a long time to make good money in real estate. You just got to pay your dues and you got to be patient. And, and that's what I tell all the youngsters too, that, don't get excited. We're not here to make a big commission and say, see you later. Right. That's why property management is so good and that's why I tell my new owners too, I'm not going to give you a pro forma rent or pro forma valuation and make a big commission and see you later, right? I want to make I'd rather make a little bit of money for 25 years than just one hit of a commission. I want to be here for a long time. And I think that resonates with a lot of owners and investors too, because that's the majority of what the smartest ones want to do is build long-term wealth. And that's a good mindset to have as far as, when you're in this industry.
Well, we'll have to have you back on. I want to do a deep dive on, maybe like tips and go through things for first time investors. Then I want to do maybe, something else that's going to be maybe, hey, I have a property or two. What's the next step? I think it'd be nice to go in depth on that. So we'll definitely have you back on. But Michael, really appreciate you. Hey, everybody, thanks so much for listening to the No Excuse Pro podcast, where we're helping people break through excuses, sharing ideas like this. And I really hope you found it valuable. If you did, please share it to a coworker, another professional in the industry. We'd be honored if you shared it. It is Thanksgiving when we're right a week before Thanksgiving as we're recording this. And so it's pass it along. If you hear anybody that's struggling out there, please pass it along. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
And there you have it, folks. Another enlightening episode of the No Excuse Pro podcast is in the books. A heartfelt thank you to today's guests for sharing their wisdom, and to you, our valued listeners, for spending your time with us. If you're ready to ditch the excuses and level up, make sure to subscribe and find all our episodes at noexcusepropodcast.com. Don't forget, the only thing standing between you and your goals is the story you tell yourself. So no excuses accepted here. Take action and make it happen.